Start with some breaking news. The Canadian economy has slipped into a technical recession according to new data from Statistics Canada. Economic growth stalled in the first quarter and real gross domestic product was slightly negative on an annualized basis according to the new numbers released within the last hour.
Uh-oh, well that ain't good. And the data I uncovered shows that it's actually much worse than what is being reported. You won't believe your eyes. Oh, and I'll explain it in plain English, unlike these snobby economists who are using sophisticated language in order to try to hide the truth from you. Even liberals will see the lights. Oof. Yeah, maybe not. But wow, it took no time for the legacy media to run to the rescue, and it led to this heated exchange between Pierre Poilievre and a Hill Times reporter. You have to see this. And baby, I love MAGA. Yes, make America great again. But apparently, I'm not the only one, and this blew my freaking mind. My name is Eli Degno, and this is The Right Call. Like, share, subscribe, hype this video up. Any interactions on this channel helps push the truth out, and maybe someday break that CBC-induced coma that so many Canadians are under. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button so that you don't miss any future reports. This report is part really sad and part damn right hilarious, so stick around, you don't want to miss this. But I did not have it in my cards for 2026, or truly ever, to see Mark Carney utter these words out loud.
Electricity imports, 60% of crude oil imports. That is mutual strength. Let's be absolutely clear. Canada Strong will help make America great again. Whose founding values of liberty, democracy, justice, and openness should continue to serve as guides to its future and the future of the world. That future should include a new partnership with Canada, a true partnership that reimagines cooperation in specific sectors that are deeply challenged by global competition.
So Mark Carney is officially a MAGA, baby. Oh yeah. This was Carney yesterday in New York addressing a bunch of elite businessmen. And it seems like the truth came out. Please do me a favor tonight. Check on your local liberal. Check in on their well-being. The crushing weight of the realization that Carney is actually MAGA might be a little bit too much for them to bear. I'm sorry to say, liberals, but you've been bamboozled. You've been sold over the last year that it was your sacred Canadian duty, your patriotic duty, to resist, to oppose, and to even hate on America. But it turns out that Mark Carney understands the one thing that I've been saying now for a very long time. The only way Canada wins, the best strategy for Canada is the following. Win by helping America win. This mutual symbiotic relationship has been the trump card, literally, of our nation, and that since its inception. So for the last year, all you've truly done was undermine our own economic growth, and we'll see just how bad it's gotten later in the report, so stick around. It's freaking bleak. But seems like Carney can't quite fool you guys anymore. The mask came off. And he's MAGA, baby. So now let's see how the CBC spins this whole ordeal. They couldn't possibly make excuses for this, right?
Yeah, I'm going to start with you. A lot of what the Prime Minister said today sounded familiar. Some of it sort of made me raise an eyebrow, particularly that last line there about a strong Canada making America great again.
No doubt, Rosie. I'm sure you rose an eyebrow or a chin brow.
And I wondered what you made of that and who you think he was actually talking to there.
I think he was talking to Americans. I think the Prime Minister has developed a tendency to adjust his message, sometimes in conflicting ways, depending on the audience that he is speaking to. And it is increasingly, I think, becoming obvious to Canadians that there's some elasticity in his message, shall we say, in terms of, on the one hand, you have the elbows up message. You have the framing of the Davos speech where the rupture is a relationship between Canada's relationship vis-a-vis the United States.
Elasticity in his message? That's a very clever, creative way to say basically, Carney is a liar. You cannot say that the man has integrity with one breath, and then with the next say that he adapts his message based on his audience. That is the textbook definition of someone who is inauthentic, someone who lies, someone who cannot be trusted.
You have a very important narrative that is set out there that has brought public support for things that previously were more controversial, like pipeline approval and speeding up assessments for other natural resource projects. And on the other hand, you have the message he delivered today, which in the case, the word rupture here was about the global order and the world, not about the relationship of Canada vis-a-vis the United States. We had a little bit of this floating in the fall. Remember when they were talking about sectoral tariff relief on the 232 tariffs, where we have a deeper integration with the United States on energy, potentially on critical minerals. And I think that is what the Prime Minister was hinting at. Yeah. But building Fortress North America is in conflict with the idea that our relationship is forever changed and we have to completely diverse challenges at home.
Rapture, rapture, rapture. What happened to the rapture between the US and Canada? Our relationship with the US will never be the same. It will never be what it once was. We have to move away from the United States. I've been saying this again for months. The man, Carney, has 91% of his portfolio, of his own wealth, invested in the US. All of his family lives in the US. There is no way he truly believes or believed that Canada could move away from the US, no matter what his CCP handlers, overlords even, are telling him.
So is it, do you think, Steph, indicative of where the non-negotiations are at? Or is it, Pierre Poilievre, basically slammed the Prime Minister today because he's now, in his view, saying something different than he did before?
To pick up on what Althea said, there's elasticity in the Prime Minister's message, and where he seeks to tailor it, to whatever audience he's speaking to, it's almost as though he forgets there is no singular audience anymore.
Yeah, oops, Carney. Long gone are the days of those private board meetings. As the Prime Minister, as an elected officials, most of what you do is public domain. So, and I'm sure in his Brookfield days, or even in his Bank of Canada / Bank of England governor days, a lot of things happened behind closed doors. You could cater your message, you could shift your narrative, and no one would be the wiser. But right now, we have people like me, and like plenty of others, who are showing the truth to Canadians. And you know what? Although Canadians are very tolerant, very docile, very kind, they give a lot of leeway, eventually, the flip-flop just cannot be sustained.
Everybody is watching what he said. So the American business leaders in that room are watching, but Canadians are also watching, and opposition politicians are watching. And when you see the Prime Minister make that reference to make America great again, and you think that's a lot of words to fit on a Canadian hat, what is he trying to accomplish there? And I do think, to Chantal's point, it is a reframing. And it's trying to get away, if there's an irritant with the Americans, and they've raised it time and time again, it's the disparagement that Carney seems to show to the U.S. administration. That frustrates them. They understand the need for other trading relationships. They understand that Canada should go and strike these deals. It's when it's constantly being framed as because the U.S. is bad, that's the bit that gets under their skin. And so for Mr. Carney to come outside that box, as Chantal so well put it, and say, there's bigger gains here, there's bigger things we can do. We saw the U.S. ambassador sort of pick up on that and say, thanks for that positive language for a change. Yeah. And these negotiations are about tone as much as they are about substance. So this is a change of tone.
Damn, you can tell that we're heading towards those CUSMA/USMCA negotiations, aren't we? And I'm all for diversifying our trade. We should seek as many amazing trade deals with the rest of the world, but to think that we can replace our 80% trade partner, that's right, 80% of our exports go to the U.S. Look, can we drop that a few percentage points? Can we go down to, say, 75%? That would be great. 70%, even better. But to go and think we can replace it, that has been the biggest lie sold to Canadians. And the fact that not only they, the CBC, peddled that lie shows just their contempt for the truth, but also the fact that Canadians ate it all up tells me that there's a lack of education, a financial economic education, and also just data, facts. They're not being shown those facts. I'm convinced if Canadians were shown the truth, their minds would be changed. But let's not take away the fact that the message is just so inauthentic. It's so hard to know what he really stands for. I have my opinions and I've voiced them here before. Because in Canada, it's elbows up, baby. In Europe, it's a strategic economy and partnership. In China, it's we'll take the world as it is, not what we wish it to be. And then in the US, well, Canada's strong, helps make America great again. 4 complete different narratives, 4 complete different messages. And right now, I think it's getting really hard for Carney to keep it all together because it just makes him come across at best as someone with no substance, no values, no backbones or convictions, and at worst, a liar. And all those lies and all that posturing has led to this sad news today. Canada is now officially in a technical recession, something we've all known and all felt over the last years is now officially out in the open.
Good morning and welcome to CTV News Channel this Friday morning. I'm Akshay Tandon. We make a start with some breaking news. The Canadian economy has slipped into a technical recession according to new data from Statistics Canada. Economic growth stalled in the first quarter and real gross domestic product was slightly negative on an annualized basis according to the new numbers released within the last hour. The agency mainly blames higher imports of gold and a weak month for Canada's resource extraction industries in March for dragging down recent economic activity. Real GDP has now declined for 2 consecutive quarters, which meets the definition of a technical recession, although the data paints a mixed picture of the.
I love how they add the nuance that, it's technically a recession, but data paints a broad picture. Just say it for what it is. We're in a freaking recession, dude. And I'll prove it. I'll show it. But for now, of course, the legacy media had to work overtime to try to defend Carney. This exchange blows my mind. The arrogance is uncanny.
In Q3 2025, the economy grew at an annualized rate by 2.6%. We have economists saying that today's numbers are so nominal they could be forecasted away and revised away. So aren't you jumping the gun a little bit, calling this a full-blown recession?
Right. So I know that there's a lot of excuses being made for Mark Carney today, and I'm not surprised. By the way, which outlet are you with?
Is 2.6% economy growth an excuse, or is that just the numbers?
It's actually, there's no 2.6% economic growth. The economy, if I could, so you're
Geez, is that journalist the one being interviewed? Because at this point, it's not asking questions, it's heckling. It's insane. Again, man, way to show your bias. And also, I know this is not the point I'm trying to make, but notice the difference in the way the media treats Poilievre when they talk to him versus the way they treat Carney. You see the contempt, you see their disdain, and you really see who they are cheerleaders for.
How many quarters are you having to go back now? 2 quarters. So you're having to go back. Okay, so let's get this straight. There's been 4 quarters since Mark Carney became Prime Minister. The economy shrunk in 3 of those 4 quarters. Canada is the only G7 country for which that is the case. There's now been an entire year of Mark Carney that is recorded in economic data, and the GDP is smaller today than when he took office. That is only true of Canada among G7 countries. And now there are 2 back-to-back quarters where the economy shrunk, which is the literal definition of a recession. Canada, and by the way, it's not just that our economy is shrinking quarter after quarter. It's that we have the 2nd highest unemployment in the G7. You think that the 120,000 people that lost their jobs since the beginning of this year call this just a technical recession? No, they call this real job loss. And then you have the delinquency rate that is up 32% year over year at 17-year highs. We have the highest household debt of any country in the G7, the worst housing costs of any country in the G7. For most of the last year, the worst food price inflation of any country in the G7. So yes, you are making excuses and trying to hide from the reality that Mark Carney has given Canada the worst economy in the G7. And it's time to stop making excuses, not for political reasons. It's time to stop making those excuses because this is people's lives. Behind these statistics are empty stomachs, empty fridges, and empty bank accounts. Behind these numbers are 120,000 people who have come home to their kids saying, we can't have you registered for hockey this year. We have to sell our home. I don't know what we're going to do. That is the reality of Mark Carney's economy, and it's time to stop covering it up with illusions.
And this is what is so touching, so deep with his message, is that behind the numbers, behind the statistics, behind the data are real people that are suffering because of decisions made over the last decade by the government that are supposed to represent, take care of, defend, and protect Canadians. And regular Canadians have known for a while now that we're struggling economically. This is not news to you. This is not news to I. We've known this for a while. We all feel it. There isn't a single one of my friends, a single one of my family members that feel positive about the state of our economy. So when we were being gaslit by Mark Carney with lines such as,
affordability is the best it's been in over a decade.
We knew deep down in our souls that that was a lie. And sure, people on the left probably entered a deep state of cognitive dissonance trying to reconcile their wallets with the platitudes coming from their dear, world-renowned economist, which is fascinating. We've been told time and time again, and this was their counter-argument to any criticism, any attacks on Carney, that he is so smart, so educated, a top economist, a 2-time central banker, Poilievre could only dream of being so smart. But the reality is that education and real-world results are not correlated, and any self-made entrepreneur could tell you that. Hell, even with my own tech companies, we used to actively discriminate against university graduates. That's right. When an applicant for a tech job would come in and we could see that they had gone to university, the CV, the resume, would go into the garbage, à la poubelle. Why? Because we realized very quickly that the self-taught developers, the people that either did a 6-month boot camp or even better, were self-taught, exhibited certain character traits, certain personality traits, certain skills that made them better in the real-world environment of a tech startup. Namely, the ones who had gone to university when confronted with a problem, and believe me, there's plenty of problems when you deal with a tech company, well, they would always look up to the leadership, the team lead or the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer, in order to get their guidance. Whereas the self-taught developer would take initiative and find a problem resolution on his own. They just exhibited more personal responsibility. And it makes sense. That's the only way they learned in the first place. And we found that to be more beneficial for the reality of our company. And this is the same thing with a country, with a government. You don't need to be a world-renowned economist to understand what you and I understand and feel. The reality, and I really believe that, I think that any average viewer of this video right now would do a better job running the country than Mark Carney would. And why is that? Well, we all daily live with the reality of balancing our own personal budgets. We don't have an infinite money printer. We don't have the ability to raise taxation whenever we make mistakes. We don't have the ability to tell the media to run cover for us. No, we have to man up, look at our family in the eye and say, this is the reality and this is how we're going to pull ourselves out of this mess. So I think that the average person, the average Canadian or American right now watching this video would do a better job. You have the competency and the skills and experience to do a better job than a world-renowned economist. So now it's time for Canadians to wake up from that deep slumber and realize that they've been bamboozled once again. They didn't learn with Trudeau. They sure as hell didn't learn with Carney. Well, maybe now they can learn. So I promised at the beginning of the video, what does this mean in plain English? No BS. No fluff. So this is Q1 of 2026. This is the latest number. We're in the negative, baby. Then we get to Q4 of 2025. That was the last quarter. The initial number was negative, but it was revised afterwards upwards. So a slight growth. But if we go back to Q3 of 2025, it was slated initially as a slight growth, and we turned out in the end to be negative. Now, the reason why we even had positive GDP growth in some quarters was because it was artificially boosted thanks to immigration. It's a trick that the Canadian government loves to use to artificially boost the economy. You just bring in more people. If you bring in more people, there's more money circulating in the economy. It makes the nominal GDP, which is the baseline GDP, look good as well. To give you an analogy, it's like if you're trying to push a broken down bus. And right now you have 10 adults that are pushing against the bus and it can't quite move it. Now, if you want to look like you have more people pushing the bus, you start bringing in 20 babies. Babies. I mean, technically they can push. Technically they have a force. But let's be honest, each individual is now on average pushing less per person than they did when it was just adults. The total number of force exerted on the bus has increased. But if you divide it by the amount of people, all of a sudden, you're not better off, are you? So that's the issue. Because when you isolate the growth of the population away by looking at the numbers on a GDP per capita basis, the true health of the economy stands out. Over the last decade, our GDP per capita went from $57,637 in 2015 all the way to $60,073 in 2025. You might be like, well, it's grown. Yes, actually, that's a 4% increase over a decade. But this is simply GDP per capita. This does not take into account inflation. For that, you need to bring in an extra variable and you get what's called real GDP per capita. It is a much more accurate representation of the economy that you and I have to deal with, live with, or in our case, suffer with. And when you look at it from a real GDP per capita basis over the last decade, Canada, all the way at the bottom, has had a 1% 8% growth in the decade, in 10 years. Whereas other countries have all outclassed us. Mexico, Australia, Germany, 4%, Finland, 5%, UK, 6%. Heck, let's go higher. Let's go look at the US. We like to compare ourselves with the US. America has seen a 19% growth. Portugal, Czechia, Greece have all fared better. The winner, Ireland, 70%. That's wild. But Poland, I love to talk about Poland because, I mean, they are a prime example of what real capitalism can do once you remove the shackles of communism. They're at 44%. Turkey, 42%. Lithuania, 38%. Meanwhile, Canada, 1%. Whereas all of our contemporaries have seen their standards of living increase, their wealth increase, their lives get better. Ours stagnated.
The strongest economy in the G7.
Well, that's another freaking lie now, isn't it? Because we are the only country in the G7 in a recession. The only one. Our peers are all faring better. How pathetic. But even more pathetic is the fact that Canada should not even be considered a G7 country anymore. The G7 was supposed to be the top 7 economies of the world. But right now, on a nominal GDP basis, Canada is 11th. We are behind Brazil, behind Russia, behind Italy, France, India, the UK, Japan, Germany, China. Of course, the US is numero uno. And I want to highlight another point, that the liberals told us for the longest time that a carbon tax was making us rich, making Canadians filthy rich.
Let me flip it around. If we took away the price of pollution, more than two-thirds of Canadians would be worse off. They would receive less. Then they get the price off on the carbon they're spending, but they would receive less in terms of the transfer. And I think very few people understand that. It is not apparent that the leader of the opposition even understands that.
Yeah, I don't think anyone understands that, Mark. I think nobody in the entire world understands that, Mark. I think you're either a high IQ individual that is just living in another dimension, or maybe you're just wrong. Like, I can't believe he actually had the audacity to say such a thing live on the air.
Certainly his rhetoric is totally inconsistent with that.
I would also like to ask Canada's 1%.
I mean, do we miss Chrystia Freeland or do we miss Chrystia Freeland? I wonder how she's doing in Ukraine.
In fact, Canada's 0.13%. To consider this. What kind of a Canada do you want to live in?
One where you're not the one in charge, or anyone in your party, that is.
Do you want to live in a country where kids go to school hungry?
No, and that's exactly why you shouldn't be in power, because kids are going to school hungry today at a higher rate than ever before. Do
you want to live in a country where a teenage girl gets pregnant just because she doesn't have the money to buy birth control?
That is such a silly point. That is ridiculous. Man, how do they spin it? Such an emotional level. Oh my God.
I think what it comes down to at the end of the day is what are the alternatives that are being positioned in order to actually bring those greenhouse gas emissions down, and in order to actually make sure that we are building an economy of the 21st century that is either low or no carbon, and is creating those good green jobs, and is making sure that we have a planet for our kids and grandkids to.
Yeah, we'll have a planet for our kids and grandkids. That I have no doubt whatsoever. What I have doubt, however, is that we will have a country for our kids and grandkids. A country that works for them, because I think they'll be living in a dystopia if things continue this way. And there's no end in sight, because when you look at the payroll employment, the outlook is grim. Canada's payroll employment fell 31.8 thousand jobs in March. This means that employment growth has virtually stalled over the last 12 months. But, except for one sector, the public administration sector, nothing in this world will stop that blob. Whereas most sectors in the economy have lost jobs, public administration has soared, baby. Let me be clear, you cannot have a thriving economy when the leading employer is the public sector. Why? Well, because unless the government generates revenues like a corporation would, which Canada categorically refuses to do, but countries like Saudi Arabia have no issues doing, then the only real means of generating revenue is by taxing other citizens who do generate value in the private sector. So if you have a growing public sector, which costs taxpayer money to run and manage, but a shrinking private sector which pays the taxes, then you run out of money. And quickly. Consider that. More than 1 in 5 Canadians work for the public sector, or in other words, 20% of the population. These are technically net negatives on a government's balance sheet because they generate less revenue for the state than they cost. And consider that it takes between 2 and 4 private sector jobs to cover the cost of 1 public sector worker. Now you see the train wreck we're heading towards. And this is one of the most damning results of the last decade of Liberal government. The public sector grew twice as fast as the private sector, which means that the burden on taxpayers of the private sector grew by 16% over baseline. That means every one of you that is not working for the government, you've seen your share of paying for their jobs increase by 16%. And this is exacerbated when considered that public sector jobs do not traditionally produce value in society. There is value for the citizens whom they serve, but not for the economy itself, because there's no output of a product or service that can be sold to the rest of the world in order to bring money into the country, to bring capital into the country. It's just truly an administrative drag on the economy. Now, if you've enjoyed this report and want to find a way to get involved with the channel, aside from liking, sharing, subbing, commenting, hyping this video up, sharing it with all your friends and family, if you want to take a step further and help financially, well, I have a Patreon. The link is in the description below. It's $8 a month, and those proceeds help me put more time in research and in recording these videos. And if you just want to do a one-time donation, I also have a PayPal link. Every dollar is deeply appreciated. You have no idea how much it means to me. And if you want to see how Mark Carney lashed out hard at reporters who were questioning him, or how JD Vance is uncovering massive fraud in the US, which is a massive drag on their economy as well, and could actually lead to the government balancing their budget if they were to root it out, well, click on the video right here. I do a deep dive, a breakdown. It's a great video. But for the time being, my name is Elliot Daniel, and I'm going to go enjoy my weekend, and I hope you guys do as well.